On the morning of May 2, 2025, panic swept through the quiet backroads of Lansdowne Station, Nova Scotia. 6-year-old Lilly Sullivan and her 4-year-old brother Jack were gone. Vanished without a trace from their rural home. What began as a frantic search for 2 missing children quickly spiraled into something far darker: secrets buried within a family, whispers of betrayal, and a grandmother's confession that would shatter the fragile trust of an entire community. From the very first hours, authorities treated this disappearance as urgent. Search crews mobilized with dogs, drones, and helicopters. Volunteers combed through thick brush and unforgiving forest, covering nearly 4 square kilometers. Every second mattered. Every shadow felt suspicious. But behind the growing wall of search posters and prayer vigils, questions began to mount. Who could take 2 children from their own yard in broad daylight? And why did suspicion seem to circle not around strangers, but inside the family itself? Lilly, born March 22, 2019, was described as bright, curious, and protective of her younger brother Jack, born October 29, 2020. Together, they lived in a weathered trailer tucked deep in the woods with their mother, Malihia, and stepfather, Daniel Martel. A family that, on the surface, looked like many others in rural Nova Scotia. But as the hours stretched into days, that image began to crack. At first, the grandmother's voice carried grief and urgency. But soon, her words shifted. Soon, they would ignite suspicion. And when the stepfather faltered under the weight of his own contradictions, the RCMP's version of events would unravel piece by piece. And so begins a case where family may hold the key to the truth, or to the most devastating cover-up yet. On May 1st, the children were seen alive in public, accompanied by their family. There was no sign of what was to come. But by the morning of May 2nd, everything shifted. Their mother and stepfather claimed that Lilly and Jack had simply walked out of the home unnoticed. At around 10 a.m., a frantic 911 call was placed. Within minutes, a search began that would grow into one of the most extensive in Nova Scotia's recent memory. The response was swift and overwhelming. Ground teams combed through fields and woods. Drones hovered overhead, mapping every corner. Helicopters scoured the skies with infrared imaging, while search dogs cut across swamps and brush. Yet despite the massive effort, no trace of the children was found. By May 7th, the operation was scaled back. Authorities had reviewed thousands of hours of surveillance footage, chased down hundreds of public tips, and interviewed more than 54 people. Polygraph tests were administered. And still, no clear answers emerged. The RCMP would admit that while there was no definitive proof of abduction, suspicious circumstances could not be ruled out. Inside the family, pressure mounted. Stepfather Daniel Martel submitted to a polygraph, insisting on his innocence. Meanwhile, the children's mother quietly left the county with her infant, an action that only fueled speculation. And then, the grandmother broke her silence. She accused Child Protective Services of ignoring past warnings and called for an inquiry into missing evidence and possible procedural failures. Her words turned the case from a tragedy into a controversy, one that now cast suspicion not only on the family, but on the very institutions tasked with finding the truth. And then came the anomalies. Early photographs from the scene showed a small pink blanket, a familiar possession of the children. Later, it was gone. Days after, a fragment of that same blanket surfaced on the edge of the search zone. Had investigators missed it? Or had it been deliberately moved? Other items appeared as well, pieces of clothing, a water bottle. Yet none belonged to Lilly or Jack. Instead of clarity, these discoveries deepened the mystery. Were they red herrings? Or signs of something more sinister, staging, misdirection, perhaps even a cover-up? With a grandmother demanding answers, a stepfather under scrutiny, and critical evidence in dispute, the investigation stood on a knife's edge. And just as the RCMP's carefully controlled narrative began to fracture, new revelations threatened to tear the case wide open. The grandmother emerged not just as a grieving relative, but as a whistleblower. Scarred by emotional trauma, she became a relentless advocate for transparency, refusing to accept official silence. Her words carried the weight of someone who had lost more than trust, someone determined to expose what she believed the system had buried. The stepfather, by contrast, stood in the shadows of contradiction. His statements wavered under scrutiny, firm one moment, evasive the next. To some, he was a grieving man, misunderstood and unfairly accused. To others, he was the center of suspicion, his behavior, his tone, his inconsistencies all pointing to something darker. Motives began to take shape in whispers and theories. Was this a family discord spiraling into tragedy? A cover-up engineered to protect reputations? Or a desperate act born of unbearable emotional distress? Then came the turning point. The RCMP made a stunning announcement. They were no longer treating this as a simple disappearance. The investigation had pivoted. Internal family involvement was now on the table. Criminal context was officially being considered. The press swarmed. Headlines sharpened their focus. Every word the stepfather had spoken was dissected, replayed, doubted. Meanwhile, the grandmother's public pleas amplified, placing enormous pressure on authorities to act, to answer, to reveal what had been hidden. The timeline grew clearer in hindsight, yet more chilling with each step. May 1st, the children alive, last seen with family. May 2nd, the disappearance, the 911 call, the launch of the search. May 7th, the massive operation scaled back. Mid-May into June, fragments of evidence, the blanket theory, polygraphs, and the grandmother's explosive revelations. And now, here, the investigation shifting, no longer outward, but inward. The gaze of law enforcement narrowing on the very people closest to the missing children. As RCMP closed in, one haunting question loomed: were Lilly and Jack truly lost to the wilderness, or hidden by the very people sworn to protect them? If this case reaches trial, the spotlight will fall squarely on the stepfather. His words, his inconsistencies, and his digital footprint could form the backbone of the prosecution's case. The grandmother's testimony, raw, unflinching, and damning, may prove pivotal in piercing through the layers of silence. Prosecutors would argue that this disappearance was not the work of strangers, but the unraveling of trust inside a fractured home. As one fictional prosecutor summarized, "We now recognize this disappearance was not external, it was rooted in the disintegration of trust at home." The public, meanwhile, has not stood still. Candlelit vigils line the streets of Pictou County. Voices rise in demand, not only for justice, but for reform. Why did it take so long for alerts to spread across the province? Why were protocols ill-prepared for children vanishing in rural landscapes? Why were warning signs within child protection services overlooked until it was too late? From town halls to online petitions, the pressure mounts for systemic change: Amber Alerts redesigned for remote areas, new oversight of social services, and safeguards to ensure no family can slip through the cracks again. Yet, haunting questions remain. Why was no Amber Alert ever issued? What explains the vanishing and reappearance of the pink blanket, an object that seemed to surface and disappear like a ghost in this investigation? And what of the stray items, the clothing, the water bottle, that never belonged to Lilly or Jack? Were they overlooked evidence, or planted distractions? For now, these mysteries remain unresolved. But viewers, listeners, and citizens alike can play a role. Share what you know. Support organizations dedicated to finding missing children. Lend your voice to petitions demanding inquiry and reform. The pursuit of justice is not confined to a courtroom, it is a responsibility we all bear. And so we close on a sobering reminder. The innocence of 2 children is fragile beyond measure. The betrayal of family, unthinkable. But truth remains necessary, no matter how dark the road to reach it. Jack and Lilly's story is not yet finished. We will continue to follow every development, every breakthrough, every reckoning that may come. Until then, remember this: only if we keep asking questions and watching can justice find a path forward.